I knew something was off the moment Karen Langley winked at me, like she was doing the whole neighborhood a damn favor. She slid the envelope across the polished oak table in the community center like it was a golden ticket to paradise, leaned back in her fake designer chair, and cooed, "Swear to God, sweetie, we're saving you from taxes." 9 long years. 9 years of hauling this Willowbrook HOA through every ridiculous crisis imaginable, surviving 3 board overhauls, 2 flood-damaged common areas, and 1 full-blown Christmas-like color war that almost tore the cul-de-sac apart. And now this pearl-clutching queen hands me a 1099 like I'm her weekend yard boy. My throat went bone dry before I even touched the envelope. I stared at the return address like it might sprout fangs and bite. The board had tucked it inside my year-end packet. Nice little summary of community contributions, a reminder about the next mandatory lawn inspection, the usual boilerplate nonsense, and right there, like a glitter bomb of betrayal, was this glaring 1099. Not my regular resident statement, not the one I'd gotten every year as a volunteer coordinator. My hands actually shook when I unfolded it. No explanation, no heads-up meeting, nothing. Just a quiet little demotion wrapped in HOA legalese. I looked up at Karen, who was already sipping her lavender kombucha and scrolling some spreadsheet she probably printed in Comic Sans. "Is this a mistake?" I asked, calm as a guy who's rerouted 1,000 Amazon deliveries in his sleep. She smirked behind her oversized sunglasses. "Nope. It's a strategic shift, darling. More flexible, more efficient. You're still part of the Willowbrook family." Her eyes never met mine when she said it. Besides, she added with that fake sweet lilt, "You'll make more now with all those write-offs." Like I gave a flying fig about write-offs when she just stripped my community liability coverage, my vote on the board, and any legal shield if some kid tripped over a hose while I was out there fixing the sprinkler system she delegated to me for years. I didn't even argue. Not there. Not then. You learn in these cookie-cutter subdivisions that yelling just gets you fined for disturbing the peace. So I nodded, smiled that plastic smile, every homeowner perfects, took the packet, and walked out of that meeting room like the walls weren't already on fire behind me. And hey, if you've ever been blindsided by your own HOA like that, do me a solid. Hit that subscribe button and drop a like on this video. It keeps stories like this alive, where the little guy finally gets to flip the script on the neighborhood tyrant. Now, back to Karen, that walking Pinterest board of passive aggression. The worst part wasn't the form. It was the joke. "We're saving you from taxes," she'd said, like I should send her a thank you card for legally reclassifying my 9 years of unpaid sweat equity without a single conversation. I still showed up at the same crack of dawn community workdays, still reported to the same group chat, still logged every repair on the same shared Google Sheet from my personal laptop, used the same HOA-issued key to the storage shed. Nothing had changed, except now the board didn't owe me squat if I got hurt hauling mulch or if the state came sniffing around their books. I sat in my driveway that night for 15 full minutes before I even killed the engine, just staring at the steering wheel, replaying every holiday party I'd organized, every neighbor dispute I'd smoothed over, every time I'd been the reliable one who never complained. And for what? A tax form that basically told me I was disposable, replaceable, technically not even a volunteer anymore. I poured myself a drink I didn't want and pulled up every HOA regulation site I could find. That rabbit hole went deep fast. Turns out there's a whole checklist: behavioral control, financial control, relationship of the parties. According to every line, I wasn't some independent contractor running my own side hustle. I was the HOA's damn employee in everything but name. No real contractor gets told exactly when to show up in their orange safety vest, what brand of grass seed to use, which script to read when calming down Karen number 2 about her neighbor's wind chimes. But I did, every single Saturday like clockwork. I wasn't running my own business. I was running theirs. So I did something I hadn't done in years. I printed Karen's email, the one with the "saving you from taxes" line, folded it neatly, scanned a copy, emailed it to myself, and uploaded it to my personal cloud. Redundancy is key when you live in a place where one wrong lawn height can get you cited. I didn't know what I was going to do with it yet, but I knew one thing. This wasn't a clerical error. It was a setup, a trap. And if Karen thought I was going to roll over and let her bulldoze 9 years of my life with one wink and a tax dodge, she didn't know the guy who'd kept this whole subdivision from imploding half as well as she thought. She called it a cost-saving measure for the HOA Treasury. I was starting to wonder, cost-saving for who exactly? I stayed up until 2 a.m. The night I got that 1099, couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, just me, an overworked laptop, and a spiral notebook filling with terms I never thought I'd need. Behavioral control, financial dependence, degree of independence. I wasn't reading HOA bylaws anymore. I was reading a checklist of every reason I'd just gotten screwed without so much as a courtesy email. I wasn't an independent contractor, not by any legal stretch. But apparently that didn't matter to Willowbrook or to Karen. No one ever handed me a real contractor agreement. Not once in 9 years. I didn't invoice the board for my hours. I just showed up. I didn't set my own schedule. Karen texted it every Friday night like it was the 10 Commandments. Every morning I'd roll into the same storage shed, wear the same reflective vest they required, sit through the same mandatory safety briefings that were really just Karen lecturing about the proper shade of beige for shutters. I wasn't independent. I was embedded deeper in their ecosystem than the damn sprinkler lines. Every rule, every fine schedule, every broken community mailbox had my fingerprints on it. And now, overnight, they wanted to pretend I was some freelancer running my own little lawn empire, that the board wasn't responsible if I slipped on ice while salting the sidewalks they delegated. What really made my stomach flip was the self-employment tax horror stories I found on every homeowner forum. I'd always assumed the board handled that stuff. But now I was reading tales of people hit with back taxes, interest, penalties, all because their HOA pulled the exact same stunt. And because I'd been issued a 1099 for the entire year's reimbursements, I was suddenly on the hook for the full share, Social Security, Medicare, everything. Thousands of dollars gone. Because Karen wanted to streamline operations. That's when the betrayal hit like a rogue golf cart. Not just that I'd been reclassified, not just that they hadn't told me, but that they'd made me financially responsible for their little scheme and still had the audacity to call a favor. I emailed Karen, kept it civil, asked for clarification. Was this permanent? Was there documentation? Had my role officially been converted? And if so, under what conditions? She replied in under 5 minutes. Short, smug, zero greeting. Relax, sweetie. We've done this before. You're still part of the family. It's just better this way. I stared at that line. Part of the family. And laughed so hard I almost spilled my coffee. What kind of family kicks you in the ribs and then hands you the medical bill? What kind of family strips your legal protections while pretending they're doing you a solid? I read the email again, then again. I could almost hear her voice, slick, dismissive, the tone of a woman who's never met a fine she didn't love to slap on someone else. Without even deciding, I hit forward to my personal inbox for safekeeping, then to a folder labeled HOA nonsense, and finally, with my heart pounding, I opened the State Consumer Affairs website. I didn't write a novel. Just uploaded the email, checked the boxes. Formal contractor agreement? No. Set hours under supervision? Yes. Provided equipment and uniforms? Yes. Invoice for services? No. Received benefits or expected them? Yes. Do you believe you were misclassified? Oh, hell yes. When I clicked submit, I expected fireworks. Instead, just a generic thank you. Your submission has been received. You may be contacted by an investigator. I sat there 10 minutes staring at the screen. Did I just nuke my own backyard barbecue invites? But then I read Karen's email one more time, part of the family, and thought if this is family, someone better call child services. Filing the report felt exactly like ordering takeout. Click, scroll, attach, done. No courtroom drama, no dramatic gavel. Just a government site that looked like it hadn't been updated since dial-up. The confirmation was insultingly bland. Thank you. Your submission has been received. No tracking number, no email receipt, just silence. I poured another drink I didn't want, kept glancing at my phone like Karen might magically know and start group texting the whole neighborhood. Nothing happened. The world didn't explode. I just sat in my dim kitchen, wondering if I crossed a line I couldn't uncross. For a split second, I considered logging back in to retract it, but I didn't. Instead, I created a folder called Paper Trail and dragged in every screenshot, every schedule, every old email, proving nothing in how I worked had changed. Only the board had quietly rewritten the rules without telling a soul. I remembered one night years ago when I stayed until 3 a.m., rerouting the community drainage after a storm that wasn't even my responsibility. Karen sent me a $15 Starbucks card as a thank you. That was the culture. Be a team player. Go the extra mile. We take care of our own. And now I was just a line item, a technicality, a liability dressed up as flexibility. I didn't feel triumphant yet. Just hollow. Maybe they'd fix it. Maybe Karen would apologize and call a glitch. Maybe nothing would happen at all. I told myself I only wanted clarity. But the truth? I wanted someone to say out loud that what they did was wrong, that I wasn't crazy, that I mattered. And somewhere deep down, I hoped they'd feel a fraction of what I felt walking out of that meeting with a 1099 in my hand and a fake smile glued to my face. 3 weeks passed like nothing. Business as usual on the surface. Same manicured lawns humming with mowers. Same clanking of community mailboxes. Same cheap coffee at the monthly HOA mixer that tasted like regret. But underneath, something subtle had shifted. First clue, Linda from the welcome committee stopped making eye contact. The same woman who used to corner me for 20 minutes about her essential oil business now avoided me like I was contagious with HOA cooties. Then the whispers started, not dramatic, just quiet, careful murmurs of the dog park. Someone mentioned the State Consumer Affairs Office had reached out for routine copies of every volunteer log, every reimbursement receipt, every email chain going back 5 years. That kind of digging doesn't come from idle curiosity. It comes from panic. Karen called an emergency informational meeting in the clubhouse that Friday. Fluorescent lights buzzing like angry bees. She stood at the front with that same confidence she wore like cheap perfume. We're undergoing a periodic review, everyone. Just a few audits to make sure our records are up to date. Nothing to worry about, she chirped. Because 5-year-old volunteer logs suddenly needing review screams normal operations, right? The silence in that room was thick enough to spread on toast. No one said my name. No one had to. I just sat in the back row, sipping lukewarm coffee, pretending to study the agenda. Inside, my heart was doing jumping jacks. But my face? Ice. Blank. Unbothered. Like I hadn't lit the fuse with one quiet click. The next clue hit when the community landscaping contract got delayed. I noticed it first because I was the one who always smoothed those things over. Suppliers weren't getting paid on time. Invoices came back stamped under review. I flagged it, marked a follow-up, said nothing. Then came the suits. Not Karen's usual pastel blazer brigade. Real suits. Crisp, quiet, clipboards that didn't have smiley face stickers. They didn't announce themselves, didn't flash badges, just started pulling residents into side rooms for quick clarifications. Most folks thought it was about the new solar panel guidelines. I knew better. One of the older guys, Mr. Patel, cornered me after his chat. Eyes wide like he'd seen The Matrix. States asking who trained everyone on the new compliance checklists, he whispered. I told him it was you. I nodded once. That was the truth. I'd written the manuals, designed the shift schedules, color-coded every violation chart for the last 6 years. You in trouble? He asked. No, I said. I don't think I am. And I wasn't. Not really. I wasn't the one cutting legal corners. I wasn't the one calling full-time volunteers independent contractors to dodge taxes and liability. All I'd done was tell the truth, quietly, to the one place that actually seemed to care. But watching the unraveling begin, seeing the gears slip, the panic ripple, the little cracks widen, that was a feeling I didn't expect. It wasn't joy. It wasn't vengeance. It was quieter, like holding a cold glass of water after a long, dry walk through a desert you didn't know you'd been crossing. Satisfying. Sobering. I kept my head down, but my ears open. Word on the street was the state regulators had pulled old board minutes. They were comparing posted responsibilities to contractor status. They'd found internal emails. I knew exactly what they'd find, 100 little admissions that we weren't contractors. We were the backbone. And somewhere in that pile would be Karen's signature on every last one. I walked back to my station. Yes, I still had one, and logged another community work order like nothing happened. Routine. Efficient. Invisible. But beneath it all, a storm was forming. And I had the only umbrella. Karen came barreling into the clubhouse like a woman trying to outrun gravity itself. Face beet red, neck pulsing, waving a wrinkled letter like it was on fire. The room went dead quiet. Not even the ice machine hummed. Just the echo of her heels on the tile and the sound of 100 stomachs dropping in unison. She didn't even pretend to play it cool. She stomped into the boardroom and slammed the door so hard the fake chandelier rattled. I watched the blinds shudder from across the hall. The state investigator was called in immediately. Some sharp-suited woman from Consumer Affairs and an outside attorney whose tie looked expensive enough to pay my mortgage. They stayed in there for hours. The door cracked open once, and I caught a glimpse of Karen hunched forward, elbows on the table, sweat soaking through her pastel blouse like she'd just run a marathon in heels. The rest of us kept working or pretended to. Nobody said it out loud, but everyone knew this wasn't about pool rules or mailbox heights anymore. This had weight. Real weight. Whatever was in that envelope had Karen rattled, and that alone was enough to get people checking their Ring cameras and quietly updating their property listings under the table. A week passed. 7 long days of fake normal. Then Karen finally called another all-resident meeting. "Let's all gather in the clubhouse real quick," she trilled over the group chat, voice straining to sound casual. The whole neighborhood dragged in like kids to detention. She stood by the whiteboard, flanked by the investigator and the attorney, clutching a yellow folder tight enough to snap it in two. "Don't panic," she started, which of course meant we all should. "This is just a routine check. The state is conducting some reviews. Nothing targeted, nothing personal." I stared at the folder in her manicured hands. There it was. Official letterhead peeking out. I couldn't read much, but a bolded line near the middle caught my eye. Just 3 words in quotes, "saving you from taxes." My chest went cold. That was it. Her line. The one she thought was clever. The one she tossed off like a joke while tossing me into a tax and liability nightmare. They'd quoted it word for word. And there it sat in her trembling hands like a lit stick of dynamite with her name carved into the fuse. I didn't smile. Didn't flinch. Just let that quiet surge roll through me like a heat wave no one else could feel. They didn't know who sent it. Not yet. But that line, that was the kill shot. Not speculation. Not suspicion. Proof in her own words, signed, dated, delivered. The room broke into scattered questions and nervous side eyes. Someone asked if we needed to provide documents. Another asked if this would delay the annual block party. Karen deflected like a woman drowning in her own script. Afterward, while the crowd thinned, I walked past the boardroom just as the investigator stepped out to take a call. The folder was still on the desk, open now, more text visible. The audit, it said, was no longer limited to current classifications. It was going retroactive, 7 years deep. Every volunteer file, every reimbursement, every email, the whole house of cards. Karen's cost-saving measure had just been rebranded as systemic misclassification, fraud if they pushed hard enough. And judging by the language in that letter, the state wasn't coming for answers. They were coming for blood. I walked back to my house and booted up the community dashboard like nothing happened. Checked off the afternoon maintenance requests, approved a new mulch order. Moved like I always did, efficient, precise, invisible. But deep down, I knew the math had changed. This wasn't just a bad joke gone too far. This was an investigation now. A ticking clock with a fuse they couldn't smother. And I was the ghost that lit it. The first sign the bleeding had started came from Mrs. Rodriguez down the street. She texted me out of nowhere. I just got a letter from the state. Says I'm owed $2,847 in overpaid assessments because of improper contractor classifications. You believe that? Attached was a blurry photo of the envelope, her name stamped beside the return address. That meant one thing. This wasn't just a probe anymore. It was a payout phase. The state wasn't speculating. They were certifying damages, calculating reparations, enforcing judgment. The board had crossed a line, and now the invoice was due. Inside Willowbrook, things got weird fast. The community fund froze for system maintenance. That was the official line. But we all knew they were trying to triage the financial hemorrhage. One guy in accounting swore legal had pulled $150,000 from reserves just to cover the first wave of compliance fees. Another said the board had been ordered to stop processing any reimbursements. Even the annual barbecue budget vanished. We went from catered sliders to store-brand hot dogs overnight. And then came the leaks. It started with a single forwarded email that landed on someone's desk who didn't scrub the header. An internal memo from the board marked privileged, do not distribute. Of course, it got distributed word for word. It read, "We have evidence that senior leadership was aware of classification inconsistencies." Karen's March 2020 email thread includes acknowledgement of non-compliant contractor terms. Recommend preparing defense strategy. Translation: Karen knew and she did it anyway. By Thursday, half the neighborhood had read it. Some printed copies like they were trading baseball cards. Others just whispered around the mailboxes, afraid their ring footage was being tracked for disloyalty. One of the retired guys, Mr. Thompson, walked past me and muttered, "If it was you, good." He didn't smile, just said it like a prayer and kept walking. I didn't answer, didn't nod, didn't gloat. What was there to say? It wasn't personal. It was math. A long, ugly equation finally solving itself. Then the real fallout began. A state notice appeared taped to the front entrance of the clubhouse. Laminated, signed, impossible to miss. State of California notice of tax delinquency. Asset freeze, in effect. It wasn't even subtle. They wanted everyone to see it. The state wasn't asking anymore. They were taking. Landscaping vendors started pulling out next, quietly at first, then fast. Our biggest mower crew removed Willowbrook from their preferred client list. 2 pool companies paused service, citing credit risk. I overheard a frantic call between the treasurer and a fence supplier trying to negotiate partial terms just to keep the perimeter from falling apart. I sat through it all like furniture. Never acknowledged, never asked, just kept running the maintenance logs and updating the shared calendar like nothing was happening around me. Inside, though, I could feel the walls contracting. This place that once felt like a second home, messy, exhausting, but familiar, was unraveling by the hour. The sprinklers were still running, the lights still on, but the soul was bleeding out one fine, one memo, one lawsuit at a time. And all it took to start it was one email. Not a protest, not a walkout, just truth documented, filed, submitted. I didn't feel guilty, not proud either, just still, like standing on the shoulder of a collapsed bridge watching the dust settle. I hadn't pushed. I just stopped pretending the cracks weren't there. They wanted me to be a contractor. They forgot contractors aren't bound by loyalty. It was like watching a dam burst in slow motion. One day things were leaking, the next everything was underwater. By week 7 of the unraveling, Willowbrook wasn't reviewing compliance issues. It was in full-blown collapse. They brought in a crisis attorney, some big-name fixer whose retainer alone probably cost more than my annual property taxes. He showed up in an overpriced suit with an underfed assistant and a briefcase that looked more like a weapon than a document holder. They held the meeting in the boardroom. Blinds drawn, guards posted outside like it was a mob trial. I wasn't invited, obviously, but that room echoed and people talk and some people record. According to Mrs. Patel, who had zero shame about pressing her phone mic to the door, the lawyer didn't even last 10 minutes before things went sideways. He read from the official state notice like it was the book of Revelation. Voice crisp at first, then cracking. Around paragraph 3, he hit the line and just stopped. He turned to Karen, pale and motionless, gripping the table edge, and said, almost too quiet to hear, "You just bankrupted us." The room stayed silent after that for a long time. Later that day, I got a group chat message from someone I hadn't heard from in years, old Mrs. Chun, who used to run the book club before they restructured her into an exit packet. She wrote, "They're sinking fast. You okay?" I stared at that message for a solid minute. Was I okay? Hell if I knew. I was level, quiet. It felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, watching the neighborhood that took nearly a decade of my life slip into the ocean and realizing I didn't feel the urge to throw them a rope. I typed back, "I'm fine." Finally, because the truth hit me then, clearer than any audit report. This was never just about taxes. Not really. This was about respect, about trust, about 9 years of showing up early, staying late, fixing problems I didn't create, training people who got promoted over me on the board, and still getting handed a 1099 like I was disposable. They hadn't just misclassified me. They'd misjudged me, thought I was quiet enough to ignore, safe enough to cheat, invisible enough to erase. That illusion shattered the moment another document surfaced, buried in the audit appendix. A 2-year-old email from Karen to the former treasurer flagged by investigators for its casual arrogance. Subject line, "Loophole City." The body read, "Even if someone squeals, we'll never get caught." It's a gray area. Just keep them off the official rolls and call it flexibility. That line was cited directly in the audit summary, page 14. I didn't need a parade. Didn't need revenge. That quote alone was worth every sleepless night, every panicked Google search, every moment I'd questioned whether filing that complaint was a mistake. They hadn't just gotten caught. They'd confessed in writing years ago and still did it anyway. The email came in at 6:07 a.m. Subject line, "Operational restructuring and strategic adjustments." That's how they worded it, like a polite obituary for a neighborhood choking on its own arrogance. The body was bloated with corporate filler, difficult decisions, economic headwinds, position redundancies. But the message was simple. Willowbrook HOA was dissolving effective immediately. No severance for the board, no Q&A scheduled. Just a list of departments impacted by restructuring, followed by a bullet point breakdown of what to expect if your access badge stopped working that day. The board didn't even have the guts to personalize it. It went out BCC. Word hit the streets like a dropped pallet of mulch. The neighborhood buzzed with panic. Driveways cleared faster than I'd ever seen. Some people cried. Some didn't speak. One guy in the cul-de-sac flipped his lawn chair and stormed inside screaming, "I told you this place was a joke." By 9 a.m., a second memo hit, this one about Karen. Effective immediately, Karen Langley was stepping aside as president pending the outcome of internal compliance assessments. The phrase was so sterilized it could have been written in a lab. No apology. No explanation. Just a line at the bottom that said, "Leadership transition updates to follow." For what I heard, Karen lost it. Blamed the attorney for not burying the memos faster. The attorney pointed the finger at the treasurer for improperly managing contractor files. The treasurer threw it right back, citing direct orders from Karen's inbox. A perfect triangle of blame, all wrapped in policy jargon and NDAs. Meanwhile, I was 2 streets over, sitting in a modest little home office with my name on the door. HOA compliance advisor. Not flashy, not loud, but permanent. Mine. My new firm specialized in worker and volunteer classification audits for mid-sized neighborhoods, trying not to end up like Willowbrook. Every day, I helped people do the thing Karen thought she was too clever to bother with. Follow the damn law. My phone buzzed with an envelope icon, a letter from a state. I opened it slowly, half expecting something cold and formulaic, but it was short. Just one line at the bottom tucked under a thank you header. Your submission directly resulted in full enforcement action. Case closed. I sat there for a long moment, letting that sink in. I didn't feel triumphant. This wasn't a victory parade. It was quieter, heavier, like a spine slowly realigning after years of carrying something crooked. Back at Willowbrook, I wasn't mentioned in a single memo. No name, no credit, just silence. But the ones who mattered, they knew. Mrs. Patel, Mr. Thompson, even the investigator, if she was honest with herself. They'd seen the emails, the timeline, the quotes. They didn't need a signature to know where it started. Some whispered. Some nodded quietly when my name came up in conversations. One guy, a former block captain, sent me a one-word message on the neighborhood app. Respect. That was enough. I didn't need headlines. Just correction. I didn't torch the neighborhood. I lit a match and pointed at the gas leak. They chose to strike it. The cafe down the road was quiet that morning. Cold sun bleeding through dusty windows. The kind of pale November light that makes everything look a little more honest. I've been coming here lately. Corner seat, black coffee, no cream, no distractions, just me, my laptop, and a list of neighborhoods who didn't want to end up like Willowbrook. I was halfway through outlining a policy audit template when my phone buzzed. Just a soft little ping, like a polite throat clear from the universe. Headline: Willowbrook HOA files for dissolution under Chapter 11 protection. I stared at it for a long moment. The same way you might look at a house you used to live in that's now just charred wood and yellow tape. No surprise. No shock. Just confirmation. The final box checked. 30 seconds later, another buzz. This one from Mr. Thompson. The clubhouse is empty. It's over. I took a sip of my coffee. Still hot. Still bitter. Still mine. I typed one line back. I wasn't a contractor. No emoji. No punctuation. Just the truth. I watched the dots on the screen as he started to reply, then stopped. He didn't have to say anything. He knew. They all did. I closed my inbox, opened a folder on my desktop labeled Homeowner Reclassification Draft Guide. Inside were 4 docs, 2 spreadsheets, and a checklist template. By next week, it would be live, a downloadable toolkit for any resident out there too scared to ask if they were being legally screwed. Somewhere in a courtroom, Karen was probably sweating through another ill-fitted blazer, blaming her collapse on regulatory gray zones and bad legal advice. But the truth was simpler. You don't get to play fast and loose with people's lives and call it optimization. They gave me a 1099. I gave them a number 2. It just started with case file.